And we are live with another episode of the Keeg Talks. Today, it's a double feature, the Keeg Talks, Monarch, Legacy of Monsters, and Godzilla Minus One, which I am affectionately referring to Monarch Minus One. Does that work? Monarch Minus One?
It's a blend, yeah.
We're you know, I think it kind of works, but for those of you who would get confused, both titles are listed up on the screen.
Mm-hmm.
I'm your host, Dimithri Perera. If you're watching us live, you're watching us on twitch.tv/The Keeg Show or youtube.com/The Keeg Show, or you're listening to the podcast wherever you get your podcast from. If you're listening to the podcast, you can't see our guests. But if you're watching us, you can see our guests. Let me introduce them. First up, he's been here before, but it's been a while, and I've missed him. I feel like he's been gone because he's been cooking up some new things. We got Nathan Cook.
Hey, how's everybody doing? You can't answer that unless you're in the live chat right now, so let us know how you're doing. It's a crazy 2024 so far. I'm excited to talk about giant monsters.
It is. The giant monsters have been following us, right? Because both of these, I think Godzilla Minus One came out last year, right? End of last year?
Like end of November, beginning of October, I think.
Yeah. And then
or beginning of December.
Monarch Legacy of Monsters started the season last year. So these monsters are following us, and they are two different approaches to the same monster, and we're going to go over exactly how that happened and what that means and how we take that in. But thank you, Nathan, so much. The Favoring Wind, if you guys didn't know. We also got first-time guest. We got Marmar. Marmar, how's it going?
Good. Glad to be here. Glad to finally do this with you. So I'm excited to also talk about giant monsters.
It's so cool because, like, I saw you talking about it on TikTok, and I'm like, we gotta get into it, you know? Because there's so much to get into. I mean, not only is this maybe our first double feature episode of the podcast, but also, like, there's just a lot to go over. Decades worth of Godzilla content, and I'm glad that I have you on this episode, Marmar. I'm glad I finally got you.
Yes.
Are these two things aside, have you guys been Godzilla fans?
Big time.
Not.
Yes.
Yeah.
Nathan can speak more to that.
So Nathan says yes, even before all this. Okay.
I've always, personally for me, within the last few years, I've been more aware of Godzilla. I knew it was very much an iconic kind of figure in Japan and Japanese culture and media. But I fully haven't looked into it up until recently. My very fascination with the lore of Godzilla.
My first time, and I've never really been into Japanese Godzilla movies. You know, I've lived in California my whole life, been an American my whole life. Foreign movies as a kid weren't really my jam, though I was in daycare once, and I think we did watch one of the first Godzilla movies in daycare, but I don't remember what it was and what happened. I just remember a lot of human faces, and being a kid, I'm like, that's not what I'm signing up for. But I think my first Godzilla kind of thing, weirdly enough, is the American-made Matthew Broderick Godzilla movie. As a kid, I loved it.
Look, there's no shame in that. I think it's a fun kids movie. I was 6 or 7 when it came out, and I think it's better than some of the recent American Godzilla movies.
Ooh.
I rewatching all of them recently, I was like, hey, look, these new Godzilla movies make great screensavers, but a couple of them have just too many human characters to really follow any kind of story.
I agree with that.
I will say that the Matthew Broderick one is better to me than Kong versus Godzilla. Or Godzilla vs. Kong, whatever happened recently. That movie was jam-packed. I don't know. Marmar, you agree?
A lot of things were happening in that movie. I would definitely agree. I think I like the concept of two monsters going head to head. I think no who wouldn't like seeing like just two monsters just duking it out. But I think to Nathan's point or Dimitri's point too, where it's like a lot of human characters are in this in a way that could detract from a lot of like what people would want to see is those monsters coming like just fighting it out. But if you're gonna have human characters in a movie like that, then it has to be either helping like complement the story of the monsters and or still have compelling human qualities to them. And a lot of there's just so many characters that were in these movies, like Millie Bobby Brown, Brian Tyree Henry, like a lot of like characters that you think you would want to see, but then they don't do a lot. And it kind of detracts you from what you originally wanted to see in that movie.
It becomes busy and messy, where
Yes.
instead of a clean story, where like, oh, I'm following this like clear story of a father-daughter or a geeky guy or whatever. It's so many people that no one's got a story, really.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, that kind of happens a lot with like any of these big, I don't want to say monster movies, but like almost like alien movies or like movies that aren't human based. So Transformers like always has this human subplot, and sometimes it works. I'm a big proponent of Transformers 1 and 3 with Shia LaBeouf. I'm a big proponent of that. Mostly because like number 1 is just Samuel Witwicky's character, like that character, Shia LaBeouf's character, and the Bumblebee have a good relationship, and like those plots move forward pretty well. But then it goes off the rails like later. And why do we need the humans in some of this? Like, I don't know if you guys have any beliefs on humans with this. Yeah.
I have filmmaking insight on this one a little bit because it's very much a thing about disaster movies in general, and like always like this crutch of special effects films, and you'll see it even in the older Godzilla movies, that what they're trying to do is offset the special effects budget of like, hey, we can't have a movie where we have this many special effects shots is thing number one. So we've got to have at least a third or at least half to 2/3 of the movie needs to be human shots. And the next question becomes like they're like investing in too many storylines because they need to be such a broad thing. Like they're doing like Independence Day, which is classified more as a disaster film than it is an alien film. And all of the movies by that director, Roland Emmerich, like Day After Tomorrow, 2012, they all follow that same thing where it's like, oh my goodness, I'm following 5 different storylines. And all of their way to react to things. And the reason isn't because that's the best version of the story. It's because the studio is saying like, well, we need to have a storyline for the teenagers, and we need to have a storyline for the older people, and we need to have a storyline for the single mothers who are going to want to thirst after a salt and pepper haired silver fox.
Jeff Goldblum in Independence Day?
Exactly. Like, it's that kind of thing. It's like we need to have a storyline to hit each of these demographics, and we need to have a storyline that includes the military so that we can have access to military equipment so that we can have a really good shot with the helicopter later.
Right.
I would say, and I'm glad, or speaking of Jeff Goldblum, I think a good, I guess, combination of human characters and like monsters would be Jurassic Park. I think they do a really good job. I think because they have one storyline for the human characters through, and it complements or like it integrated with why the dinosaurs are there in the first place. It's because these humans brought them back to life. Why? Because they were bored. I don't know. Like it was just I like Jurassic Park 1 and 2 and what they did with those stories. So I think that's a good, at least for me, that's a good example of balancing the human characters and their storylines with seeing the CGI budget really well. So
I fully agree with that.
Yeah. I think Nathan and Marmar, you guys are bringing up a good point of like there's just multiple storylines and multiple things going on, and like in Jurassic Park, it is the humans, and then the dinosaurs are revolving around that.
Yeah.
And then Nathan was bringing up the fact that like everybody needs to get something out of this movie, and although that's maybe not the best approach to movie making, it is the best approach to producing. Or, you know, as an executive, because, you know, why would we want a Godzilla movie where only kids are there, I guess, watching it? I don't know. But, like, Transformers like, you would think a Transformers movie would just be like, why can't we just focus on the Transformers and their motivations? And I think it's because, like, the people who want romance don't want romance from Transformers. They want human romance.
Exactly.
But we have yet to get a Transformers romance. I'm just saying.
It's, you know what? Bring Transformers romance to the screen. This is the representation we need in this decade.
Yeah.
I'll say I love Marmar. I loved your Jurassic Park example, because I think that that as an example helps create the difference between like the disaster movie with this like Roland Emmerich style Independence Day disaster movie that Godzilla movies often fall into, and a sci-fi film. Because I think Jurassic Park is much more like a sci-fi film, right? It's hey, we've got these characters in a specific situation that's sci-fi, and we're gonna watch the sci-fi situation break down, kind of like in Terminator and Aliens. It's like it's an ensemble of people, but we're dealing with one problem. While a disaster movie, like disaster movies harkening back to the 70s, it's like, hey, we've got it's one problem of the giant ship sinking or the tower burning down or whatever, but we're going to have 9 people in different locations dealing with different types of a problem who are completely unconnected. They're not even friends with each other. Like Jurassic Park, they all arrive together and leave together. But Independence Day and Poseidon Adventure and 2012 and Day After Tomorrow, these are entirely unrelated, scattered stories. And the modern Godzilla movies, or at least the last 2, Godzilla and Kong, or Godzilla versus Kong and Legacy of Monsters, they have that scattered problem where you're like, well, how do these connect? Who are these people to each other? What's the coincidence that brings them all together? I'm so bored.
Yeah.
Or there's the approach of like remember that moment in cinema history where we got all those tangential, like Valentine's Day, New Year's Eve,
the Love Actually effect.
Yeah, he's just not that into you. You know, those type of storylines where like they're Love Actually, where they're like mixing and matching and whatnot. Like, I get that. By the way, can you guys hear the honking in the background? I'm not sure.
We can't.
Cool.
No.
Awesome. Somebody's
it's like Crash, but for romance though. It's like
yeah, exactly. So,
yes.
Like, disaster movies tend to follow that, and I think a really good approach is Jurassic Park, where you're telling a broader story about like corporate interests and man playing God and whatnot. And I feel like that's how Godzilla movies started off, which was the human plot is part of this like story they're trying to tell, where this is just basically the story they're trying to tell where it's about mankind through the lens of like, yes, these things happening around us. Quick question. What was the first Godzilla related content that you guys had watched?
Nathan, go first.
the 90s movie when I was a little kid.
Yeah, same here. Yeah. Marmar?
I can't even. I mean, it's definitely more recent for sure. I would say the 2014 Godzilla, I think, is like one of my first. I've always known of Godzilla, but I've like seen him on a big screen was probably the 2014 Godzilla for sure.
Yeah. I mean, that's really when I started. Well, I guess maybe that was the first time on the big screen that I've seen Godzilla also, because like I watched it on VHS when it like the Matthew Broderick one, you know? And I keep saying that because I forget what year that was.
Like 98, I think.
Yeah.
I bullied my family to take me to that. Like, I was a little kid who was like, this is the movie I want to see. If you love me, I'll watch this one movie, please.
Yeah.
That kind of thing.
I grew up almost primarily watching TV shows because we couldn't afford to go to movie theaters. And we would, every so often, we would get a VHS from the store, like from the rental place, and but it would have to be a family movie, or if my friends and I are having a sleepover, then I can watch something that like only we watch. And like, that's where I watched Godzilla. But most of all, it had to be like a family movie most of the time. So I definitely did not see it in theaters, and I couldn't drag my parents out. But that, that's just me. There was also that Godzilla cartoon that came out in the 90s, right after that 90s movie.
The tie-in cartoon.
It was good though.
Yeah, that was the same time like as uh mostly Sony, well at the time like Columbia TriStar was doing a whole bunch of tie-in cartoons to everything they produced. Like I think the same team
It was the
behind that
same team.
Godzilla show
Yeah.
did the well the same team that like the artist team also did a Men in Black cartoon,
Yeah.
which was also Columbia TriStar. And yeah, like I think very vividly of those two cartoons as like the same, almost like greenlit by the same producer who's like, I need a kids cartoon for this by next Friday.
I'm trying to
Like,
find a name of that company, but they also did the Jumanji cartoon. They
yes,
did the Extreme Ghostbusters. They did Big Guy
all of
and
these are
Rusty.
Columbia TriStar.
Yeah, and then they did Starship Troopers. A
I don't
Starship.
know if that was a Columbia TriStar one, but at the time, Ghostbusters and Jumanji both were.
But like that is funny that there was kind of a lot of um um movie tie-ins. But anyway, point being is that like like these monster movies being just disaster movies, or them being more like in the vein of Jurassic Park, where they're trying to tell a thematic kind of story. And when it comes to Monarch: A Legacy of Monsters versus Godzilla Minus One, I think people forget that TV shows and movies have two different jobs, right?
Right.
People think that TV shows are long movies. That's what Disney Plus thinks. They just
yeah,
think
or
that
Netflix like occasional miniseries.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Do you guys have any opinions about TV versus movies?
Yeah.
I'll let Marmar go first on this one.
Oh, oh gosh. I to point too. I think we need to get out of that mindset of like movies are like cut up, or like TV shows are cut up movies, because it serves different purposes. Like TV, especially when it's released weekly or have a certain release schedule, like it's there to keep you kind of engaged for that hour, and then like until the next week, and so it's like the story is like in a way that's supposed to leave you hanging, and then keeping that story alive for that long period of time. Whereas obviously movies are just, you're there for that one moment in time, and you're there to kind of on that roller coaster ride and out of it. So I think we can't see them as like the same or like a version of the other. So I think, and like I feel like right now I'm more of a TV person than a movie person. I still love going to movies, but it's depending on what you want to get out of.
Yeah.
In terms
By
of
the way,
TV
a quick
format
question
versus a movie format.
Nathan, is Marmar frozen on your screen, or is she just frozen on mine?
She just froze at the beginning of.
And the audio, the audio was there for the most part, but it did kind of like popcorn a little bit.
Okay.
Yeah, we got like 90% of the audio, I think.
Okay.
Like, you're like we heard you.
Okay.
Yeah.
But
okay.
Yeah.
Let me know if anything else comes up.
Yeah, I'm with you that like I'm just a big TV guy, and I love movies, but movies to me are just little bite-sized things that then like I watch it and then I crave it like for another one for like 2 years. If I'm lucky, I'll get a sequel, and if I'm not, then I'm like, well, this was a moment in time. It was two ships in the night. It's that sort of thing. Movies are kind of like that.
I always see movies and TV not as the difference between like a book, like not like the difference between a book and a short story or something like that, but like the difference between a short story and a recurring magazine. So like and that dates me so much, like how much I read when I was a little kid. But like if you think to yourself, like, okay, I like this article, I like this Sherlock Holmes-esque article that's showing up in this magazine every week. I'm going to buy this magazine every week to just sort of spend a little time every Saturday morning reading this. That's a TV show to me. It's about spending time with the thing. It's about the vibes. I want to keep coming back to this vibe. A short story is much more like, I want this theme. I want to be taken from the beginning to the end, and I'm going to just wrestle on this very specifically crafted experience.
Yeah.
So like when I love like I prefer movies mostly, but it's because for me it's almost like it's a very specific it's like a very specific thesis. Like I've got an hour and a half to 2.5 hours to make a very specific experience and capture something. Like I love that. It's so distilled and concentrated. And when I watch TV shows that try to be movies, I actually kind of get stressed out because I'm like, I'm here to spend time with you. I'm here to get to know you and invite you into my home.
Yeah.
It's like it's back to like what in the 60s, the show Maverick, they would talk about that the reason Maverick worked is you wanted to have that character hanging out in your living room with you. And it's like, that's the vibe I still want. I watch The Great on Hulu or, Bridgerton, not just because they're a good story, because I want to hang out with these people.
I mean, that's also what's missing from modern TV is like now they're like 6-episode seasons. You don't get to hang out. Like I do miss, and I know that is it Watch with Mike? Is that Mike on? I know his full name, but like Watch with
that's Mike.
Yeah, Watch with Mike. Like he talks about how like where are the filler episodes? Where are the two characters get trapped in an elevator episodes? The bottle episodes, right?
Yeah,
like. These are the types of things we're missing. The episode where somebody turns into puppets. Like, we don't get that anymore in some of these bigger budget TV shows. Not that I want that from Monarch Legacy of Monsters, but, I do think, though, what you're saying, Nathan, is right, is like there's a thesis for movies. A good movie has a point, and then they're telling the story to bring it all together. And I would argue that like there are certain shows that are both good TV shows and have a thesis, but a lot of them aren't. So like Westworld season 1.
Westworld season 1, totally a thesis and a point, but like Westworld kind of loses the plot as it goes on because you're like, this thesis doesn't continue for 3 seasons, and not every season came in with a banger thesis.
Yeah.
So.
That's
like
true.
and like I love shows like Westworld season. Well, I like only season 1. Season 2 was fine. I fell off after that. Yeah. But like Russian Doll or Haunting of Hill House on Netflix, those are like 6-episode to 7-episode shows where it's like I really liked this, but it feels much more like a big movie or like a chapter book than it does like a TV show. Like you can't when they did Russian Doll season 1. Yeah, everything came together. I really appreciated it. But when you get to that TV question of, I want to come back and spend time with you again, coming back for season 2, the pitch is different. You've told your story so perfectly and completely in this mini series that you didn't quite have something to tell of the same stature for the second time around.
Yeah. Huh.
I think that's why I guess like, oh no, do you hear me?
No, yeah. Sorry, continue.
Okay. I think a good balance of those two things would be like anthology series TV shows where for a fact that season is going to like similar to a movie where there's a point and it's going to be a beginning and like season premiere and a season finale, and then that okay, next season is going to tackle something of the same vein thematically, but then still a different story with a different point. So like obviously like American Horror Story for the beginning few seasons, or I would say even the White Lotus too is now in that vein too, where there it's all the same. It's the same hotel, but different place, different characters, and different themes are being tackled in that season. So I think in a way, like again, I think to the earlier point too, where it's like there's 6-episode seasons now, but I think as long as you're able to be engaging for those episodes, and then if you have to continue with something a bit fresher or like more creative to keep you coming back for a story like that.
I think that's a great point. Like I would 100% agree with that. And maybe even anthology shows are going to be like the future of TV as long as we have to have these like short seasons, because then it means that if the storyteller doesn't know that they're getting a season 2, they can tell their complete story in season 1, which is what a lot of storytellers are doing now. And when the studio comes to them and says, we've got a season 2 because that was so great, then they say, okay, we're going to do a new thing for season 2. And like White Lotus, Fargo, True Detective.
Fargo.
Fargo's my favorite of those. I think that's my favorite show on TV. Like seasons 3 and 4 were good, not great, but season 5, that was so good. And when you go to a show like that where they're like, hey, we make a new season of Fargo when we've got a story to tell you.
Yeah.
And I'm like, great.
Yeah.
I agree with season 5 of Fargo was amazing.
So now as we're moving into talking about Monarch Legacy of Monsters and Godzilla Minus One, I think like tackling both of them from the medium that they are, as opposed to which one is better, or like which one, works better as in the medium from what is asked from them, I guess. Um, do you guys have a number out of 10 that you would rate Monarch Legacy of Monsters, I guess, season 1, and Godzilla Minus One? And I mean, you can explain it very shortly, and then we'll get into exactly like we'll dive a little deeper as we go on.
I think I got a number.
I can go first. Or do you want to go first?
No, you go first. I just want to make. It's like I'm just telling the teacher that I got the
Okay.
paper ready kind of thing.
Okay. I think I would put Monarch at like an 8.5 out of 10. Only because it surpassed a lot of my expectations of it, even though my expectations were not that high to begin with, to be quite frank. And I can get into that later, but then I think Godzilla Minus One, I will give it a good strong like 9.
Yeah. I mean, me personally, I'd say like Monarch probably 8 out of 10. There were points that I was like, I'll come back to it tomorrow. And then there were certain points where I'm like, I need the next episode. Where's the next episode? And so, like, it kind of yo-yoed with my feelings, especially coming at it with lower expectations. I didn't like Godzilla versus Kong. And so I didn't know what to expect from this.
Yeah.
And I didn't know when this was set. So 8 out of 10 for Monarch, 9 out of 10 for Godzilla Minus One. Like, I'm not a 10 out of 10 for Godzilla Minus One. I liked it a lot, and I don't know whether I'm going to rewatch it, but I liked it a lot. It is what it is. I don't know. Nathan.
Yeah.
I think I give Godzilla Minus One a little bit like if there's a way like a fraction higher than a 9, but not even quite a 9.5. That's me. And there were parts of the movie where I'm like, okay, this is good, not great. But when I remember like the budget that they had, and honestly how hard it is to make a great Godzilla movie, and they definitely made a great one, I'm like, okay, that's the challenge ahead of you and what you took out of that and the originality. Like, okay, it's like I'm giving you just like I need to push it a fraction above 9, but yeah. And then for me, I'm a little bit colder on Monarch. I didn't dislike it, but I had a lot of times where the show like hung me up about character choices, where I thought a lot of stuff just felt like they were tripping over themselves a bunch. And I also had a lot of problems with like where they put the camera a lot, like on a technical level. I'm like, you guys clearly had $1 billion to make this show, and you put the camera in the most boring place imaginable. And so I give it about a 7.
Yeah.
Still a passing grade, but it's really the last 2 episodes. Like, if it weren't for the last 2 episodes, I'd be like 6. But those last 2 like really crossed the finish line strong for me.
It did definitely dip right before.
I agree with that.
Where did it dip for you guys?
I think it's because it was a strong beginning for me. That's why I was like, wow, this is actually really good. Like, I'm gonna keep tuning in. Like, you could tell it was dragging. It was trying to fill out those 10 episodes. And you're kind of like, okay, like, why did we have, I don't want to say like why did we have that episode, but there was like a lot of just like space in certain episodes, like in the middle, where you're just like, okay, like things happen, but like, did we need to see that? Like, was there, we could have added maybe another monster in there, but maybe logistically that didn't make sense. It ended strong for me, which is good for a lot of Apple TV Plus shows. I know like a lot of certain Apple TV Plus shows, they have a good strong like beginning and middle, and then a lot of the ending is a very toss up.
Yeah.
So that was nice that Monarch kind of stuck with the landing in that regard.
Yeah. I definitely think there are a lot of like big budget shows that it's almost the opposite, where like it can start off strong and it kind of it keeps going in this direction, and then it dips in Act 3 essentially, and it's like, what happened? Did you run out of steam? In this one, it was almost like they knew where they wanted to start and they knew where they wanted to end, and then they were like, what happens in the middle? They're gonna sneak into a building. Like
Yeah.
that part lost me, and I also
Mhm.
got lost when they're just kind of like stuck in Alaska or Antarctica or Russia or wherever they
Oh
are in
yeah.
the snow for like a whole
Yeah.
episode. Like when they first
Yeah.
land there, and then the pilot dies, and that mole monster comes,
Mhm.
the Titan comes out. That
Yeah.
part's cool. But then the next episode where they're just like, "Yeah, we're freezing to death now," and it's like, for a whole episode.
Yeah. Well, hey, you wanted those filler episodes, right? You wanted an episode where they just
That's
Here's
true
an
too.
exception. Here's an
That's true
exception
too.
to the filler stuff. I hate dream sequences. I hate
Okay.
dreams.
Yeah.
I hate psychic people spending a whole time like, oh, I've gone into like an actual like physical manifestation of somebody's psyche. Like, I don't like those. I'm in a virtual
hallucinations and
reality
anything.
episode where like nothing matters and I need to figure things out. I don't like that.
Yeah, I think I would agree with that. I tend to think that that is like it's like a writer's crutch. It's like I can't if when the writer can't figure out how to make something work through the tension and drama of characters talking to each other, and instead they're like, well, I need this character to fully change their mind about something, but on their own. So, and I don't know how to communicate that with direction. I don't know how to communicate that with metaphor. So instead, I'm going to have the conversation. I'm going to have the character have a conversation with themselves through their past. And you're like, that's crazy. Almost no one does that. Like almost no one in real life has that experience. It's not relatable. It's just deep.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that too. I think especially because like going back to Monarch where I think his Kentaro. I was trying to remember what his name was, but yeah, I think he had his whole little journey of because I get trying to like, show flashbacks and I mean the whole show was about flashbacks because you through especially with the Russell father and son duo. So I understand like they already established that there's going to be like different timelines. But I think him kind of going like out of body out of mind experience in order to kind of realize like I found this like little shed thing, this is where my dad like it's a lot of like those kind of like hallucinations, and I guess you can make it like he was freezing so he was hallucinating and that's why he's in his mind, but yeah, a lot of it kind of it felt cool, and then it kind of was you're trying to figure out where it was going from there. It kind of detracted you a little bit until they kind of he got back to finding them again in the snow. Like, how do you find people like in the snow, like storm, and then like, oh yeah, we found each other again? And it's like, you would have died realistically, but okay.
Yeah, and I felt like as a use of screen time, it took away from something that I think was ultimately the most underserved part of the show. And that was the very clearly established lesbian romance happening between the sister and the friend, which like they are now cuddling, and I never got their chemistry and flirting to get them to cuddle. I want that. I love me some sapphic romance. Give me the tension. They're just all of a sudden now like, I clearly care about you, baby doll. And I'm like, what? I would like to have seen that, like you nursing her to health in the cold. Like that would have been great.
Especially because it's like Kentaro dated her too. That's what that was a missed opportunity of like, that's my ex and that's my sister.
Yeah, when he clocks that they're like clearly cuddling and flirting in the car later, his look is just sort of like, I'm a cuckold. I'm okay with that. It's like it's that kind of vibe. You're like, do you have feel that? So this gets to my big criticism of the show. My big criticism of the show, because I agree that things like dipped in the middle, and it was very much that the writers knew where they wanted like things to end up, but I felt like a lot of things to get there weren't fully validated. So for me, the turning point in the show to like is right after they free Kurt Russell. From the moment they free Kurt Russell to then like showing up in the country where the like where they fall through the hole, like all of that, it's like I'm enjoying myself here and there, but they would do a whole lot of back and forth of like, I'm mad at you, but actually, no, I'm not anymore. We can't trust them. Now we can. And I'm like, why can't you trust them? Yeah. Why should you trust them? Why are you mad at this person? Why did you suddenly forgive them? I don't know. And the reason is that they need to keep the show going. And you're like, but they didn't earn a lot of stuff to get you there. So that it just kind of like, I would be frustrated. Be like, why do you suddenly feel differently than you did in the last scene? But because of that, like there were some dynamics that like mattered a lot to me that would then get underserved. Like the romance would get underserved, or like knowing whether or not Monarch is a shady company got under. Like,
I
are
couldn't
they
figure
shady
that out.
or are they just? Yeah, they threw it out. It's like, is
couldn't.
Monarch shady or are they just underfunded? Like,
Are they under? Is it bureaucratic red tape that's just stopping them from getting stuff done, or is it someone shady being like, "No, I need the Titans to run amok"? Like,
right. And they feel like they don't commit in a lot of directions with that, and so that just started to like really peeve me off.
I
Where I
didn't
was
know
like,
whether to trust that one guy, the glasses guy,
yeah,
who
they
seemed
really said
sinister. But my problem is, it wasn't fun for me to figure out who to trust and who not to trust. That wasn't fun because I didn't feel like the show knew at that moment whether the person was trustworthy or not.
the reality is that the show, and this is what you like, you if you start to think like, what's the producer probably saying to the writers, is that they wanted everyone to be trustworthy, but no one to trust each other, and that's really weak writing. Because if the show's called Monarch, you need to, and the Monarch is clearly the centerpiece of the franchise, so Monarch can't be bad guys. But if you want your characters to be on the run without that company, then you need them to not trust Monarch. So trustworthy people constantly not being trusted is convoluted. So you have a convoluted problem.
Yeah.
I think that's why also, because you're competing with two different, or it's two storylines going back to like the flat, like it's the past and then like the present, and then to that point of like the past is telling you that, yeah, is it underfunded? Did we just not have money? Did people just not trust us? Because, you know, the military and higher ups were like, didn't believe that there were monsters in this universe. And that story honestly was a lot more compelling to me in many regards. Like, you tell they were trying to balance going back and forth, and then they spent more time in the present, which I get. And then yeah, going to the past where it's like, okay, like what is Monarch then and what is Monarch right now? And then yeah, I think it's tried to figure out, it kind of wants to keep you guessing of if it's one or the other. And that's where the part where you're kind of like, I don't know what to believe because you're telling me two different things, but it's not serving the overarching of like story. And then so yeah, I see that point too. And it goes also to like Monarch as a legacy, where it's like Monarch is also a family. Like that plot was actually kind of more compelling to me, where it's the family aspect of Monarch. And I did like it. But yeah, I think it's trying to tell you what what Monarch is in these different regards.
Yeah,
but it's like different pieces, and it's not.
I think that they told us what Monarch was much more often than showing us a same, including with that like family part, because the Monarch is a family business thing kept feeling really thin to me. Like it was great in the old sense, like when it's the three of them and they're like, we're building this from the ground up. And so I felt like, even though I found all that really compelling, the choice that they made to have them like lose control of Monarch to the government, and the choice to then have like everybody die off separately and stuff, it's like, okay, is it really a family company anymore, or are these people just the ones who were there at the beginning? And then the like next problem became then in the modern time when characters are like, I think so and so is going to help us because it's in their blood. I was like, effing why is it in their blood? You can't explain this to me. She is a substitute teacher, or she's an elementary school teacher. What do you mean she's going to help you find the monsters? I don't believe you.
There were confusing stuff in this show, like with the whole like it's in their blood. Like, you are J. Edgar Hoover Jr. and you need to be in the FBI. It's like, why?
Like
it's in your blood.
Yeah. It's in your blood. I am literally a jazz artist. I don't know what you're talking about. Like that kind of thing.
And it's not like, I think it's not the trope of, I've been out of the game, I'm not coming back in. It's like, we need you. You have experience. It's a substitute teacher and an artist.
Yeah, it's like, you know what? I think that you guys can help find your father. It's like, why can we help find him? Because only you have been traumatized exactly right to know what he would do next. It's like, he didn't even tell us what he did for a living.
Yeah. Yeah. Marmar, what were you going to say?
Here's the thing though. I do like the family drama of it all, but I think them trying to attempt to connect it to Monarch was, I think, to everyone's point here, that's where I kind of faltered, because there's this compelling story with family that that's why I kind of liked this show, with that family aspect. Like, it kind of gagged me where they're like, oh my god, we found out we're half siblings. Whoa. Like, all I know from Hiroshi is that he's just a shitty father, and I'm kind of more interested in figuring out why he's a shitty father. And then he just so happens to work for Monarch. I think that's where it kind of like they're trying to connect something, like, in a way that like is supposed to be more meaningful than it seems like. Yeah, it's to the point. It's like they're doing more telling than showing.
Yeah.
I
Real quick. Sorry,
there could be a connection there, but I think the writing needs to be more succinct and more like just.
Sorry, Marmar, your connection is getting more.
Do you hear me now?
Yeah. Is there a way to reset the connection at all?
Okay.
Maybe it might come in clearer.
Let me see.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Try to.
In the meantime, I will just say.
No, you're good. It might just be Yeah,
it just says your network bandwidth as well.
Oh, I think
that's all. Okay, I'm gonna agree with Marmar, because I for me the really interesting thing is this like setup of these two siblings who didn't know they were related. Their dad just has recently presumably died, and he is he's got secrets about a company. And it's like, that's really interesting. I want to know why he was cheating on his other wife. Like, that's what I want to know, and I want to know how the characters feel about it. I want to know what led to that. Like, I was kind of interested also, like, in one of the flashbacks into the like 80s when he's like talking to a nurse. I'm like, ooh, is that him talking to one of the other mothers right there? Like, I want to know more. And they didn't give me a lot there, because they wanted us to so much get into like the cloak and dagger of the company. It's like, no, I'm gonna get the cloak and dagger of the company. Tell me about this man cheating on his wife. I want to know. I need that. Give me that juice.
It was fairly intriguing. I wanted to know, why is he cheating? Was there something that happened that made him like maybe like more susceptible to cheating? I don't know. I was trying to find a reason, like, that his parents like weren't really around for him, which I guess is kind of like
did he feel a sense of fear and insecurity, and he needed to like put that together by having families and everybody? He could never deal with loneliness because he needed, like, so if he's in a different country, he needs a family there too. Like, it's
right.
Those are questions that I'm like, I want to probe that mind, as opposed to just being told it happened and we move on.
Like, yeah, I feel like they didn't flesh him out as a good enough character. Like, I don't know, he wasn't fleshed out enough for me to really care, especially given the sci-fi stuff that happens around him.
Right.
Like with Kurt Russell coming back, or Wyatt Russell technically, and being like, now we're like the same age. I couldn't make sense. So also, I went into this show, I didn't know when this show was taking place, and I didn't know, like, I got really confused on who people were. And keep in mind, like, I've seen the Aaron Taylor Johnson one once. I've seen King of Monsters once, but I saw Kong Skull Island twice. And I saw Kong versus Godzilla once. I didn't realize until the last damn episode that John Goodman is Bill Randa. I've seen that movie twice. So I'm like, what is going on here?
They have him in an almost blink and you'll miss it thing in the first episode. And I kept thinking about that the whole time. Like, is that supposed to be? So when we would meet a character, I'm like, is he the same guy? And I like double checked IMDb to know. But if I have to double check IMDb to know what characters I'm following, that's a little much. Like, you should give me, like, I just wish they had given like a moment in the dialogue, like, yes, ever since Bill Randa disappeared on Skull Island, and you'd be like, okay, all right,
right,
yeah. They never really referenced Skull Island back. And then, it was only that first episode, and then they assume that you still know that that's still Bill, like, John Goodman's Bill Randa, but he's younger. I will say that they try to hark back to 2014 Godzilla, which is, it's nice to know that the connection is in a way that it happens to certain other people in that tragedy. So I like that there's still a connection, but it's from a different perspective. It's from the civilians who were actually like traumatized by this giant monster. So I like that regard where it's like try to like still be its own story, but then still trying to connect to this monsterverse that Legendary
Yeah.
Pictures and like is it Warner Brothers? Yeah, I think it's they're trying to
Warner,
kind of
I think Warner Brothers
create.
is now. I think Warner Brothers might not be a part of that anymore because Legendary, I think, is
Oh,
now because Legendary fully owns the rights, and I think Legendary's contract with Warner Brothers, like their collaboration contract, I think it's up. So I think Legendary
oh,
is going to be working with other people now, like it might be Universal or something. But
So, yeah, I mean they can collaborate with whoever they want. I'm looking at it right now. Legendary is a subsidiary of a Chinese conglomerate. And so they're not owned by WB. They've just been working with them. That being said, I don't think they're cutting ties with WB anytime soon because they have the Godzilla versus Kong versus Justice League comic that's out right now. And
oh, yeah, but that's also a different license. Like
yes,
I think the thing that I read was that the distribution deal they had specifically with Warner Brothers Pictures, that was the thing that like it had lapsed and they were like looking for new partners. And not necessarily an exclusivity partnership, but they're like, we're gonna expand out and not necessarily be home at Warner Brothers for distribution.
yeah, it looks like as of 2022 they've reached an agreement with Sony Pictures, um, but that Godzilla, Kong, New Empire, and Dune Part 2 would continue being Warner Brothers Pictures. So those both come out this year.
okay.
And that Legendary would also continue to partner with other companies for streaming, such as Netflix, as Sony does not have a streaming service. So, yeah, it looks like their deal with Warner Brothers lapsed and they're moving to Sony.
And Sony tends to Sony doesn't have a streaming service, but Sony does a lot of business with Netflix. Like if you ever like pay attention to what's on
Yeah.
Netflix, it's a ton of Sony titles like Men in Black, Mask of Zorro, Jumanji. There's usually a wealth of Sony stuff there.
Yeah. By the way, shout out to it's Adelaide Productions is what the cartoon company was called. The animated arm of Sony.
I should remember that.
Or
That's
Columbia
my favorite
TriStar.
company ever.
So, Adelaide Pictures did all of that. Adelaide Productions. Anyway, side note. So Monarch obviously falls into this trap of like kind of where these monster movies were going, or MonsterVerse movies were going. Do you guys have a favorite of these MonsterVerse? Because this is collectively known as the MonsterVerse. Do you guys have a favorite movie?
Easily the 2014. Easily the 2014. I think it's shot so beautifully.
Yeah. I agree with the 2014 Godzilla. I actually did like Kong Skull Island. I think it was something that it felt different. And it felt like it harked back to, I mean, because I also like some of the King Kong movies as well too. And then it's cool to kind of see those. I think I like the characters in that a lot more in Skull Island. I think it was like Tom Hiddleston, Brie Larson, Samuel L. Jackson. And that had a much like a more succinct thematic like message to it. So I would say those two movies as well.
Yeah. And I think that's a great distinction. Like the characters in Skull Island are really engaging, and it's definitely saying something more than the Godzilla one is.
Yes.
But I think that the Godzilla movie is like better looking, like the way Gareth Edwards shoots just like realism or special effects, it just looks so amazing. And I think it's got a very like nice tone, like the tension and the sense of horror are really good. But like, yeah, I think those are the best two movies in the franchise.
I love Kong Skull Island. The fact that it had something to say, it accomplished it. There are so many little pieces to the story in Kong Skull Island with like John C. Reilly and the Japanese pilot. Yeah. Like that whole storyline, we never needed to revisit it, but like that was like, doesn't he go back to his family at the end?
I can't remember.
That's
I think
crazy.
Yeah, John C. Yeah, I remember that. Like he was there for like decades.
Yeah.
Like trapped there, and until that group came in, and then it was like, oh, I can leave now. So
yeah. And then Samuel L. Jackson being a man whose war ended, but the war continues. Like there is always an enemy out there, and like he is so unhinged. And like some of the deaths in Kong Skull Island are not PG-13 deaths.
They're pretty gnarly.
The scene where the soldier looks up and then he gets a spider's leg through his mouth downwards. What?
Yeah.
I love Kong Skull Island. That's why I was rooting for Kong.
Mhm.
Godzilla versus Kong. He was definitely the underdog in that, and I don't think they did him justice.
In Kong Skull Island?
No, in Godzilla versus Kong.
Oh, I see. Oh, yeah.
Because Godzilla beats him pretty easy.
I agree with that.
I thought Godzilla. Hold on. Now I'm wondering, am I misremembering the end? I thought the ending of Godzilla versus Kong was that Kong ends up being the winner, and
I don't remember. All I remember, they go up against Mecha Godzilla, right? Like
they go up against Mechagodzilla, and then like Kong kind of gets the victory lap at the end, swinging through the underground, the upside down with his Thor's hammer.
But like he was cool. He was cooler.
Yeah.
But against like 1-on-1, I think Kong loses, right?
Yeah, Godzilla is insanely powerful. Like
Yes.
Kong's cool. Kong is cool. Godzilla is a self-regenerating nuclear weapon.
But I wanted Kong. Here's the problem. This happens in a lot of superhero comics. It happens a lot of like this things, right? Superheroes are always the best in their specific series, right?
Right.
Superman will always win in Superman. Batman will always win in Batman. Like Flash will always win in Flash. But when you bring them all together, you have to make a choice as a writer to differentiate every main character. Now you have a group of main characters, right? To the point where they're not all of the Justice League should be genius level intellects.
Right.
Superman doesn't need to be a genius. Flash, although he is smart, he doesn't have to be able to invent a time machine by hand. Like, he doesn't need that. That's not the Flash, you know? Kong and Godzilla both come at it from, like, their number ones, but Godzilla shouldn't be smart.
No.
Kong should be insanely smarter than Godzilla.
Yeah. Godzilla's a great fighter with a whole lot to use, but Kong is agile, and he should have the intelligence, the tool, the usage of tools, and all that. Yeah.
Right. Like that was my problem with
raw
Godzilla.
Power versus intelligence. Yeah.
Right, and also Godzilla is more of an animal.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Let him be able to be tricked like you would trick a dog, you know?
Yeah. This
is that only because I just remembered it. Oh, sorry. Go, Nathan.
No, go for it. Go for it.
I just, when you said Godzilla about, it's just him as like a kind of more of a monster, just a brute. I remember in Monarch, I don't know if you guys remember when he supposedly saw Anna Sawai's character, it was like Keiko Randa, and they were all making it sound like, oh, like he saw you. Like he had, there's like, I guess like a smidge of like humanity in Godzilla. Like, I don't remember that when I think the father was trying to awaken Godzilla.
Yeah.
And then he started walking, but like, he stopped at Keiko for a hot sec and then like walked away. I thought that was kind of, and maybe correct me if I'm wrong in terms of lore of Godzilla, but there are most moments, I guess, with all these monsters where they can recognize another being in front of them and recognize that, okay, you're not a threat to me, so I don't need to come at you this hard.
Yeah.
Which I thought was interesting.
I think that's something they've been trying to push in this MonsterVerse, that like I think it's a little bit thin, like especially in this one. I was like, because when they're like Godzilla recognized her from the Golden Gate Bridge, where I don't think he looks at her directly in that scene. Like, what are you talking about? Recognizes her. But they've been trying to push this thing because it's present in all of the movies, as early as the end of the 2014 one. This idea that Godzilla is actually the deity protector of everything, and like a literal god. And that means he also, like Santa Claus, knows if you're naughty or nice, and he's gonna look at you and go, "You're one of the good ones. I'm not gonna smush you." And I'm like, that is such a stretch. Right, but it's present in all of these movies. It's
he
like
wouldn't walk through the Golden Gate Bridge unless everybody was guilty in his path.
Right, it's because he should be like the force of nature animal that's just there because he was pissed off and is looking for food. And maybe he's also you should be a territorial like a crocodile and say like you do not like to the other giant titans. It's like this is my space. You don't belong. Go back downstairs. And that makes sense to me. Where it's like he does not like the other titans because he's the king of the castle. He can get along with the ones that play nice, but otherwise he'll knock them out. I'm like, cool, I can get behind that. But the idea that he looks at people is like, I remember when you asked for a bicycle on your 5th birthday, and I won't smush you.
I always thought the God part was metaphorical. Like, not that he is specifically Earth's protector because he, as an entity, is Earth's protector. That he is the strongest, and good thing he's good, unlike King Ghidorah.
Well, in Godzilla Legacy of Monsters, they take him to a temple to heal him.
Wait, King of Monsters or
not in Legacy of Monsters, in Godzilla King of Monsters. Yeah. That's what I meant. In Godzilla King of Monsters, they take him to like a temple to heal him, and they make that. I feel like that movie made it pretty clear, like he's a deity almost. Like he's conscious of being one of the good ones, and he's here to make the world a better place. Like, and I was like, I think that's why I don't like that movie. I'm like, that movie is a gorgeous collection of images that look good on a computer and a whole bunch of nonsense along the way.
I mean, I also don't like the trope where in monster movies, they're like, you know what killed the dinosaurs? The star of this movie. Like, it's always like, or just an asteroid hit the dinosaurs. Like, what? We don't need King Ghidorah to kill the dinosaurs for him to be bad.
Right. And that also, I have so many issues with like that movie and Godzilla versus Kong. As many things as I enjoy about them, they do a whole bunch of world building stuff just totally shit.
Yeah.
Like suddenly we have hovercrafts and you're in the Marvel universe. And I'm like, no, you could just be in a regular science world, like where we don't have hovercrafts, but like we can study like whether or not there's a radioactive signature in the area. Okay. Yeah. Or the idea that like King Ghidorah is an alien, and it's like we are not wrestling with the fact that aliens exist. Like, where is that conversation in this movie?
It's too much. Yeah. Also, and we will go into -1 territory.
Yeah.
But what King of Monsters does King of Monsters bring up the Hollow Earth stuff, or is that only in Godzilla versus Kong?
It's only in Godzilla versus Kong, I think. I think that the implication again, I've only seen King of Monsters twice. I've seen King of Monsters twice, 2014, 3 times. Godzilla versus Kong only once, and I've only seen Skull Island once.
Watch Skull Island again. I'm just telling you.
What I remember is that Godzilla versus Kong like starts with, by the way, we've got a Hollow Earth, while the thing that they set up in King of Monsters is just we have a bunch of hibernating monsters we have found. They're all dormant, the same way that the monsters at the beginning of the 2014 movie were dormant.
Yeah. I hate Hollow Earth theory because was an actual theory back in the past, like in the real world.
Yeah, it's a Jules Verne thing. It's
that's
like Journey to the
Center of the Earth. Yeah.
Yeah.
I hate Hollow Earth theory, and so I hated when Godzilla vs. Kong did that. I hate that whole plot. But then Monarch Legacy of Monsters states that it's not a Hollow Earth. It's another like dimensional plane.
Yeah, it's a multiversal thing underneath that exists like underneath us.
It's only underneath because they come from underneath, right?
Right.
So they hit the portal in the crust, but they're not going to the center of the Earth. They're hitting that portal and then going to another dimension.
Something like that.
So they retconned
I think you're right, but I didn't pick up on that. I was too busy wondering when the lesbians started flirting with each other. I was like so distracted that I couldn't. They could have explained. They could have explained how I should have passed my classes in college in any of these episodes, and I would have been like, I'm too hung up on the changes of decisions that the characters are making.
I don't want to derail this conversation, but I do want to point out how attractive every single woman in this show was.
And the Russell boys. You keep this thing hetero like flexible here.
I don't think Wyatt Russell is good looking. I do think Kentaro is good looking. He's a good looking
Yeah.
guy.
Yeah,
I
I think they're all.
they're all attractive. This is a good group. This is a good looking cast in my opinion as well too.
Yeah.
It was funny that I'm glad it's because they're kept making hints at like Kurt Russell, like, hey, you should have been much older. Why is
Yeah.
he not much older? And I was like thinking to myself, like, I'm sure it was some radiation thing that happened to him. Like it has to be that. And then they finally got to revealing that, and I'm like, okay, so I was right. And then Keiko, I was like, okay, Keiko, the mom, the grandma.
What's her?
I know the actress. Going back, I know the actress's name is like Mara Yamamoto, but I can't for the life of me right now remember what the character.
He is the most stunning person on the whole show.
He is gorgeous,
breathtaking.
Yeah.
Well, she's
when
Keiko.
She showed.
She's Keiko. Kate Randa is Anna Sawada.
Oh, it is Keiko. Okay,
Yeah.
so Keiko. I knew I think she has to be out there somewhere.
Yeah.
So I had this inkling. I was like, okay, she's not fully dead because it has to. Like, if the reason why Kurt Russell is still young, is probably connected to why Keiko might be somewhere in this universe. So I was like, okay. Like, I liked, like, they revealed that. I was like, okay, cool. So it's she's like a woman out of time kind of thing. I like that. It adds to the family drama of it all. But yeah, I think Keiko is probably my favorite character in the series for sure.
She pulls a lot of weight in those flashback scenes.
Yeah. She was very much the heart and soul of this show in terms of like what Monarch was supposed to be. And losing kind of that representation and that symbol of within Keiko could be why Monarch went the way it did afterwards.
She's also the most emotionally consistent character. Like, she's the one who I never ever said out loud, why did you change your mind? Like, it always makes sense why she's having a reaction to something. She's very consistent, very understandable. I'll also say, like, she is one of those actresses who's just so commanding and strong seeming and gorgeous that anytime that she's having a romance with either of the other guys, I was like, why? You deserve so much better than either of these men. It's like, until Pierce Brosnan's James Bond shows up, there's not a person pretty enough for you on the screen. Like, I was like, you're so much better than them. And then they reveal she's a single mom, and I'm like, no, you're definitely better than both of them.
Yeah. I thought that Hiroshi was gonna be fathered by one of them.
Yeah.
Because in my mind I was like, timeline wise, that doesn't make any sense. Because how long were they hanging out with each other? And then it was revealed she was a single mom already to begin with, and I'm like, okay, this makes more sense.
Well, they even touch on it in the show that because I thought the twist was gonna be that instead of being Bill Randa's kid, it's his kid.
I thought that too for a hot
sec
as well.
His grandchildren.
Mm-hmm.
I think they simultaneously made the choice that makes the most sense, but is also the least dramatic, but also the best for keeping everybody a good guy. Which is why I said I think that there was a writer thing of we need everybody to be agreeable. So that way there is no well, you were the cheater or you were the guy who never raised me. It's like, no, these are both the surrogate dads, and this is the mom, and they were actually a happy little polyamorous family, and they would have been a whole thing. Yeah.
If it had gone that way, yeah. Also, I mean, I was also trying to figure out the age of their dad, because I'm like, how old is the dad?
He still does not make sense to me. That man had to have been, because Monarch starts in the late 40s is the first scene that we see, chronologically, I think, is 48. So that means the child has to already be born at that point, right? So 2 years, let's say 2 years old at best. That means this guy's born in 1945. It's 2015 when the show takes place.
Yeah.
That means he is 70 years old.
Yeah.
If I want to be really generous and shave a couple years off, he's 68. And I just don't see it.
Oh my god. Wait. Yeah. I don't know. Maybe he got sucked into the Hollow Earth too. I don't know. At this point, they could have said that.
He spent half an hour in the Hollow Earth at some point.
There you go. It's gonna be revealed if they ever have a season 2. And then I'm
went bungee jumping into the Hollow Earth. I let get a little dip, and I'm done for the week. And dip, and I'm done for the week.
Yeah. By the way, Keiko, when she realizes that time has passed, she pulls it off.
That was very sad.
He pulls it off. I do have a criticism of that scene, and I'm
okay.
okay if you guys disagree with me.
Yeah.
Okay.
So at that point in the show, that's when I had like my wife and I have been talking about like making directorial choices because we're filmmakers who are like planning scripts and talking about like what think do and don't work, and the idea that people in the show would often change their mind or do something because the script needed them to, and we feel like it didn't necessarily work. There's one thing that she does in that scene that I feel like it's in the script, but the director didn't like sell it to her. She's emotionally doing great, but the choice doesn't work. And that was she turns away from Kurt Russell and walks over to a tree and then like looks at the tree instead. And I know that like in the mind of the screenwriter, it's she can't look at it anymore. She wobbles over to the tree and needs to like catch herself there. But instead it just reads as she turns and starts to talk to the tree. Like that's just kind of like her face is selling it, her voice is selling it, but it's like
I don't know if she needed to turn around. Yeah, I mean, now that you mention it, it didn't. I don't think she needed to. I think she has enough
better tableau. Yeah,
yeah. I think she has enough of a I mean, not talent, but like enough, she can emote that. Yes. Like I don't think you needed to turn around and like show that you are sad. Back.
Was she turning away from what's his name though?
That's what I think the screenwriter wanted. I think the screenwriter wanted like, okay, she turns away, staggers away towards the tree, can't look at him, and is holding herself on the tree. Like if I was writing that scene, that's what I would expect. Which the only change I would make then as the director would be, okay, now walk over to the tree. Now it's not so much that you're walking to the tree, so you're walking away from him and you kind of stop at the tree. Because it's a place to stop.
Yeah. It's intention.
But instead the director's just like, well, the script says that you need to turn to the tree now. So just do that, please.
we just did a revision of the script. You didn't have enough time to memorize your lines. So we wrote your lines on the tree. Just go to the tree.
And she's like, I can do that. I can kill that.
She's like, I would have known. I would have been able to practice. No. Don't worry. We wrote it on the tree.
It'll look great. Anyway. You'll walk towards the tree. We'll give the tree some lines. Yeah.
You know, we'll figure this out.
Yeah.
I guess maybe one last thing before we move on to Minus One and how they tackle Godzilla and whatnot is the time periods. Not only were a little bit confusing for me, but also like the fact that the show's present takes place before King of Monsters.
Yeah, and that's also what was confusing.
And then they time travel to before
Godzilla versus Kong.
Right before Godzilla versus Kong.
Because they ended in Skull Island. Like the ending showed that
there's a Monarch facility in Skull Island. Wait, is there a Monarch facility in Skull Island in Godzilla vs. Kong? Yes, right?
I think that's where Godzilla is at the beginning of the movie. Or where King Kong is, in the beginning of the movie.
Because the little girl is there, right?
Yeah.
Okay. I want more Mothra. Give me more Mothra in these movies. That's what I want.
Where is Mothra at this time?
Mothra is at a ladies' night. She's having a girls' night out with the other lady monsters.
Did Mothra die, by the way?
I don't think she did. I think she had she fought with him in Legacy of Monsters.
Yeah.
Or King of Monsters.
King of Monsters.
I'm easily confused.
So close.
I'm with you. I don't think that series that have subtitles should recycle any of the words in.
I agree.
Yeah. I think we should be on Revenge of Monsters. I think that's where we should be.
Right.
The other thing is that they use such vague words, King of Monsters and Legacy. It's even more confusing than the Planet of the Apes movies, frankly.
I thought Monarch themselves were going to be the monsters. I thought, you know?
Which would have been kind of cool, but then they would have been like moralizing against like a centerpiece of the franchise. But fun fact, by the way, as we transition to Minus One, this is actually one of 2 shows called Monarch that came out in the last year or so.
What's the other one?
The other one was a Susan Sarandon movie about country music or Susan Sarandon TV show about country music that made no sense.
Does it tie in with this?
No, it's just also called Monarch and came out within a year of this show.
Did you go in thinking there would be big monsters?
There should be. No, it's reverse. I came into this show thinking that I would see Susan Sarandon playing guitar.
Being king of the monsters?
Exactly. So it should be.
Yeah. Okay.
No, but yeah, just random, coincidentally same name.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's
well,
funny.
It's kind of funny because there's 2 movies coming out this year that have subtitle Empire. One is Ghostbusters Frozen Empire, and then the other one is Godzilla X Kong The New Empire.
And then we should have Dune, which is Sand Empire, and then they're going to be a new Taylor Swift. It'll be the Swifty Empire, and then it'll be the Empire verse.
Yeah,
and then we'll get an Empire Records remake.
Yeah. I mean, and then Empire Strikes Back again, a new Star Wars movie. So you know,
it should be Empire Strikes Back again.
Yeah.
Yeah. I thought you meant it just again.
No, Empire Strikes Back again. They're like
Empire Strikes Out.
There we go. That's better.
So Godzilla Minus One. This is a hard transition, I guess. But the point being is that, like, obviously what Legendary is doing with their MonsterVerse is they have a goal in mind, right? They're trying to sell toys. They're trying to make things big blockbuster. They're trying to see big old fights and just a lot of flash. And if we're lucky, some substance.
Versus, they want a Marvel Universe-y kind of thing.
Well, good on them, though. You know, I'm for it. I think there is a space in this franchise for essentially two franchises.
Oh, 100%. 100%. These companies, Kyoto and Legendary, are so different in tone that they do not. It's not confusing a bit.
Right. We talked about Godzilla Minus One being pretty highly rated by each of us. Though for me it doesn't get to a 10 out of 10 for me. But I went in and I watched it in color with English subtitles, right? And I didn't know exactly what to expect, other than people said the themes were really like important and whatnot. You guys have any opening thoughts about Godzilla Minus One?
I will say that right before the movie started in my theater, there was a few young boys like above me basically saying like, yo, this is my second time watching this and this is so good. You guys are gonna love it. And then I was like, cool. So that really kind of was like, okay, I've made it a little bit more hype for it. I mean, if like these young boys are like going into second time and are like very hyped again, like I was like, okay, this is cool. And then it was really great. I knew it was a good movie. I've heard a lot of our like neutrals and a lot of other people raving about it. And so, yeah, I think what got me with this movie was how emotional it was. And it felt like a human story that just so happened to have a monster in it. But yeah, I think it was more emotional and it was action packed as well. But the human story was really what got me in Godzilla Minus One.
Yeah.
I was telling Marmar before we started. Oh, and by the way, shout out to that one wizard kid out there. I didn't get to say that out loud. That one wizard kid is in our Twitch chat. Thank you so much for watching and being a fan for a good amount of time. It's been a long time since I've seen that one wizard kid in our chat. So welcome back. That one wizard kid said, now I'm even more excited. So I can't tell what that is in reference to, but maybe they want to hear us talk about Minus One. I was telling Marmar before we started that my biggest criticism for Minus One is that I didn't like how Godzilla looked. And that's just me.
And now here's my question.
That's a matter of taste.
Here's my follow-up question.
Yes.
Is that a matter of, because you could mean one of two things here, and I want to know which one it is. Is it a matter of, I didn't like the photo element of how he interacted with the world, like the quality of the special effects, like, oh, he didn't feel quite real enough? Or is it a design? I didn't like that he looked so bulky and had a puppy face. Because he does kind of have a puppy face in this. So which is it more? The design?
The design isn't my favorite, but it's not my biggest criticism. It's the way maybe it's not CG, I don't even know, but the way it looked like it was claymation or a puppet like in the olden times. I know that's kind of what they were going for, but it didn't look like he was interacting with the environment.
Maybe it's because I just knew going into the movie how low budget it was.
Yeah.
But I was like, because it's essentially made on the same budget as you might send a letter or buy some popcorn. Like, it was made for pennies. So I was like, this is just incredible. Like I was like going and being like, this is essentially made by this is like Tony Stark built this in a cave with a box of scraps. So I was like, I'm just very happy there.
You know what the budget for this was?
It's like 10 million or less.
10 to 15 million, yeah.
Yeah. And I'm sure a lot of that actually went to like the aerial fight shots and stuff like that, where they needed to have actors interacting more. But like I didn't like the like on that photo quality, because again, I knew how many people were involved with it, so I agree. I like it less than the last Kyoto Godzilla movie, but
Is that the Shin Godzilla?
Shin Godzilla is my favorite Godzilla movie. Shin Godzilla is my favorite Godzilla movie, period. It's horrifying, it's brutal, it's bureaucratic. Like, very much my pitch for Shin Godzilla, for anybody who hasn't seen it, is that it's, imagine if somebody very much influenced by Wes Anderson in like where they put the camera, wanted to make a genuinely horribly uncomfortable movie about bureaucracy, and they used Godzilla to tackle bureaucracy. It's all that with like the backdrop of like the nuclear reactor or the nuclear breakdown problem in Japan in 2011. Like, it's very much, it's inspired by that, dealing with bureaucracy. And instead of Godzilla being horrifying and like he's a big scary monster who will eat you, it's more like this is this grotesque mutant thing that does not care if it kills other people. And so yeah, Shin Godzilla is my favorite. For me, I would say Shin Godzilla, then the original 1955 Godzilla or 54 or whatever, and then this. Like, that's my top 3 Godzilla movie ranking.
See, I don't have that.
I gotta check those 2 out then.
You know?
Oh, yeah. It's so like it's really good. I'll also say the Shin Godzilla is funny. It's unexpectedly very funny because it's a black comedy or a dark comedy.
Yeah.
Like, so as these like bureaucratic things are happening that the characters are dealing with to try to like deal with this Godzilla crisis as he kills people, a lot of funny things happen. Like, the camera's in a very particular place watching people work on their laptops, and then one person like suddenly grabs the laptop like, I think I found it, and everybody else is like working, and it's done like a comedic bit. Okay. And it's just really a good satire. Like, it's the most satirical Godzilla movie.
I've seen the
I think you sold me on Shin Godzilla.
Oh yeah. And then the first Godzilla is the scariest. The first Godzilla is sad. Like, the original 1955 is one of the most heart-wrenching movies I've ever seen. Like, really, like, you're like, this is a monster movie. He's like, no, this is a movie about nuclear fallout, and you're gonna watch babies cry while nuclear fallout goes through the town. And you're like, oh, this is upsetting, actually. Like, it's a genuinely very upsetting movie. But yeah, so that's my Shin Godzilla, then the original, and then this.
Okay.
I'll check those out and I'll let you know, Nathan.
Awesome.
I think you sold me on those 2. I think you sold me.
Oh, yeah. That's everything else is just Barney, but with scales.
I've heard, right? Like, that they introduce a little baby Godzilla, and
like Son of Godzilla.
Yeah. Because then they treat it more like almost the Universal monster movies go in this direction, where their first movie are monster movies, and then to capitalize on it, and maybe kind of tying in with what Nathan was saying at the beginning of the episode, like, everybody needs to be able to watch this and get something out of it. So kids need to watch a new Frankenstein movie. Now we got Abbott and Costello meets Frankenstein, Abbott and Costello meets the Wolfman, Bride of Frankenstein, those type of things where it's like, are we getting away from the source here?
I was like, Bride of Frankenstein, just talking Frankenstein for 2 seconds. That's Frankenstein and Bride of Frankenstein. You got to watch those movies together because Bride of Frankenstein's amazing. Everything else is the silly thing. Bride of Frankenstein really acts like it's the second half of the book. Like, it's really those 2 movies. If you ever want to go back and watch the classics, Frankenstein goes straight into Bride of Frankenstein. They were practically produced back to back. It's same director. James Wales, who also did The Invisible Man, same director. I highly recommend, like, those are a good marriage. But then everything else, you're like, Dracula versus Godzilla, Abbott and Costello meet Godzilla. Godzilla got his foot stuck in the tram, like crap like that.
Yeah. Okay. Let's talk about the humans that are in the center of Minus One. The movie starts off, and I didn't expect to see Godzilla right at the beginning. I didn't.
Yeah.
Because a lot of these movies
Yeah.
don't. They don't show Godzilla until like a while in. But you see him right off the bat, and like it was a very interesting set piece that the main protagonist is a kamikaze pilot that didn't want to die. So he detoured and said there was plane problems and how there's a shame in that. The human element in this movie was really good. Marmar, do you have any thoughts about like the human storyline in this?
Yeah. Yeah. I think and just I think what I love about Godzilla, and I'm doing more research on Godzilla, is that being this kind of allegory and symbol of like the nuclear disaster that happened in World War II against the Japanese civilians. I have to specify it's against the civilians, and having the bomb dropped on them, and then having to for themselves, basically, like the government really didn't do much. They themselves had to figure out how to rebuild their life after a war like that, losing this war. And Godzilla was a really good like just symbol of that, and like the struggles and the adversity and the tragedy that they had to face head on, not just individually, but Japan, like in many other countries, are a collective country too. So being a collective and trying to figure out how to move forward from adversity and tragedy. That's why I'm very fascinated with the Godzilla story. And I think this movie, like you knew going in, like that was what the story was going to be. And then having those humans and then like having this kamikaze pilot that doesn't want to die was just so interesting, because a lot of in that kind of like culture during that time was like, yeah, you would die for your country, like like full stop, like no questions asked. You don't question your government either. So for him to kind of have that kind of conflict was really interesting. And then at the same time, having other people in his village and having to like meet this partner that he has, I forgot her name, is it Noriko? Yeah, Noriko. And then finding the child Akiko as well, like that little like found family that they created too in this monster story was so like unexpected, but it was like the story made you care about these like people that like faced all of this like just horrific that they faced. So it was nice to like see that, and then have that like all the veterans basically of this war coming together to try, because they even I think made it, I mentioned it multiple times, where it's like, okay, our government's not going to do anything about this Godzilla. They're not going to believe us, so we ourselves have to figure this shit out and defeat Godzilla. So to see that camaraderie, to see that unity amongst the civilians was like, it was very like emotional, it was very inspirational too. So that's why I didn't expect to have that kind of human connection to this story in a monster movie.
There were a lot of themes in this movie.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think the persistence of war is like is a huge part, and that like war just keeps going. How do you defeat? You don't defeat Godzilla because you can't defeat war, right? Like, is that if I'm writing like a high school English paper on it? Is that what like? Is
Yeah,
that what we're dealing with?
Yeah.
Here?
I think I would say that's true, and that like there is
Mhm.
never a sense of finality. You don't get to wrap it up
Yeah.
with a bow, and that's what these characters are wanting, because they can't move on. And I think that there's something that goes back to the kamikaze element there too, where it's like he had a task where his life and his war would end, right? It's like you're expecting an ending. There's a finality there.
Mm.
He can't accept that. He wants his life to go on, but he still is anticipating the sense of finality. My duty needs to be wrapped up. Whether that's forgiving myself or defeating the bad guy or saving the people who should have died, whatever. There needs to be some sense of like finality before I can go on. And being able to just choose to live in spite of, it's like, this is unwinnable. This is unwinnable. You need to say that the most important thing you're doing here is not defeating the bad guy, winning the war, dying in the plane. It's living at the end.
I mean, I've always thought that like, and this pops up in tropes in cinema, is that like a big sacrifice doesn't make up for like all your life's transgressions. So like I think like living and making amends is a stronger choice just in general in life and in movies. I think that it's almost like when you have this like villain Kylo Ren that fights with Rey at the end, and he gives his life, and like great, but also you've killed billions of people. So this doesn't get you to heaven.
Yeah, just because you died under one nice circumstance doesn't mean we're suddenly going to feel great about it. It's and I think that there are movies that handle that in a complex way or in a vague way, even like purposefully vague, and then people like put on that level of forgiveness that where it wasn't there. Like a great example is like staying in Star Wars for 2 seconds is Return of the Jedi. I don't feel like the ending of Return of the Jedi is supposed to say that Darth Vader was a good person. It's that Darth Vader at the end of the day chose that last little bit of goodness he had and died on that note. There's a reason that Luke isn't honoring his father at the end of that movie with everyone else because he knows that Darth Vader's still not a good person. He just can honor him. And, he knows that his soul can find peace, but that doesn't mean like, oh, we're all going to collectively forgive Darth Vader. And then like later franchise installments take a totally different, like, I think tone on that as the audience also did, I think a little bit. But yeah, I think that I think it's a more interesting thing to say, like, that, you need to do more than just like a sacrificial loss to make amends. But I think it's definitely a trope in movies, right? Of like this character did so many terrible things, but like Snape in Harry Potter, he absolutely bullied several children for 7 movies and, for 6 books, 7 movies, whatever. But he was killed by a snake, so I guess he's a good guy. It's like, no, Neville Longbottom was abused by this man. I want hashtag never forgiving Snape. I don't care how much of a crush he had on Lily Potter. He bullied Neville Longbottom and Hermione Granger viciously.
And he was bad. He was bad towards Lily. He was bad towards like everybody. And I get that he was picked on by those guys, but also, what?
Yeah, he still joined a white supremacist group, right? He joined the fascists. It's not like he was like, well, I don't really like the fascists, but I want to get one in on James Potter. No, he's like, I joined the fascists, and then my childhood crush died. Dumbledore,
after he called her a slur.
Right. Dumbledore, can you help me make amends? And Dumbledore's like, yeah, kind of, I guess. And then it's like he doesn't ever become a good person. He just is willing to do whatever Dumbledore tells him. That's what it is. So yeah, but I think the audience members like redemption, as we all do. Like, we do want to see people become good. We want to see that arc of like forgiveness because we want it of ourselves. We all have things that we feel guilty of, or family members. We want to be like, hey, I know that this family member's done terrible things to me, but I want to believe that things can be made right someday. So that's very satisfying for us. We'll take every opportunity we can to forgive people. But what this movie presents us with, which is like, okay, you want to earn forgiveness? Like, I was so happy that the character, spoilers for anybody who hasn't seen Minus One, but the character who didn't die, I was so happy because she had earned, in my opinion, him being there for her. And I think that's it. Be what other people need, improve their lives, and that's how to earn forgiveness, right? Like, that's how to live a better life.
Right. I was really happy when she, like, spoilers again, but it was like when she came back at that very last second, I was like, yes.
I don't care how little sense it makes. If she had died, that would have been my number 1 most upsetting movie death ever. Like, I would have.
She did die, and we were all upset.
Right,
but if she had stayed that way, I would have come out of the movie being like, I hate Godzilla. I can't believe it.
By the way,
I agree.
There are 2 theories. Let's talk about Noriko. There are 2 2 theories that I've read online about her.
Has the venom parasite.
Well, kind of. So there's one that's just saying that like she they found her, and that they mentioned that sometimes it takes a lot of time to find people. Mentioned in the bureaucracy, or not the hospital, whatever that office was that he goes to find, what's his name, Tachibana. He goes to the place, and they're like, it just takes a lot of time to find someone. So like it kind of foreshadows that, but then it shows a little bit of the thing on the back of her neck where I'm like, what are we seeing here? I thought it was radiation poisoning.
I think it's radiation related, but it has a shape that reminds you of like Godzilla's tail, especially when it powers up, like when he gets all nuclear chargy. My wife believes that she's got like a particular type of Godzilla thing to deal with. So if they do a sequel, it would be like, let's deal with what it's like to have radiation dealing in a community. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
I read a thing saying that there might have been something about Godzilla, like somebody said like a shard of his scale or something that like, you know, got into her and now she's healing also because she shouldn't have been able to survive, and she seems to have healed fairly perfectly.
Right. Which is not, we don't, it's not like we have a bunch of people from that disaster who are healing, and here she is like healing the way. Like,
She
I'll
didn't
say
have scars
movie,
on her face either.
This movie leans on Godzilla's radiation healing more than any other iteration of Godzilla does. More than Legacy of Monsters does with the nuclear blast, more than Shin Godzilla does, and I won't spoil how that Shin Godzilla handles it, but like this movie, like they're very clear, like if he gets injured, he heals. It's like
His whole
Wolverine.
face blows up and he heals, and then in the end he falls apart and he heals.
It's like Deadpool. Godzilla is Deadpool. He's got a fourth wall break to the camera.
If he has even one cell remaining, he can come back.
He will come back. Yeah.
So that's why like some people are like, is it a supernatural kind of ending for Noriko?
And maybe the indication there, because like they might not get you always have to make your movie assuming you might not get a sequel, right? And so they, like the last Godzilla movie, none of those storylines got continued. So what does it mean if none of these get continued? Then is Noriko just is the implication like, hey, she survived, but as with any survivor, she now has to bear the scars of survival. And you don't get to know as the audience what that means, but you do know that it's specific and unique, and it may have consequences like the scars of survival did for people in Japan.
Yeah. Marmar, did any of these scenes make you feel sick? I'm very interested in other people's. The beginning scene where Godzilla attacks all the men made me feel sick.
Like sick as in like
physical?
I was kind of, I was,
yeah.
I mean, I wasn't going to throw up or anything. It wasn't that. It was more like I felt sad, depressed, scared, but then also like the pit of my stomach was like, ugh.
I mean, I think this movie did really well. Is just, I guess, showcasing that Godzilla was this like menace, this monster, and then he, in a way that I think, going back to kind of the Western portrayals of Godzilla, where there has to be some sort of like level of humanity to Godzilla. Like, oh, it's like, yeah, like he saw me, so he's not gonna kill me today. Where in this one, it's like, it's again going back to kind of the allegory of Godzilla to the Japanese people, and like saying like this is a monster. He is just going in without any disregard for other entities and beings around him, and he's just like trudging forward regardless of any destruction he leaves in his path. And so this movie did a very great job like showcasing that and kind of making you feel like sick, like, oh my god, like these people are just losing their lives after fighting and losing a war. So I think, yeah, and in those kind of scenes too, like of those deaths, like it wasn't like gory or like gruesome, like it was just more of emotional, like, oh god, like damn, why did they have to go like that way kind of thing.
Yeah, it felt like almost like the way that you might deal with a scene like Saving Private Ryan, where you're just like, oh no, oh my gosh, it just keeps so much loss and it keeps going.
Yeah. Do you guys think that Koichi could have done damage to Godzilla? Because Godzilla was smaller at that point. Could Koichi have killed Godzilla with those guns? Because as far as
you mean in the beginning?
Yeah, in the beginning scene. Because as far as I remember, it mentions that the nuclear testing made him bigger, right? Like after that scene. So that he wasn't as big, but American nuclear testing made him bigger. And then thus undefeatable. We never see him regenerate in the first scene. He's essentially like a big T-Rex. Could he have just died and never came back?
I have a theory about this thematically. I think that it's very important for it to not matter, but for the answer to possibly be no. I think that the reason it matters for the answer to not be, or for the answer to possibly be no, is because that way it's very similar to his decision to not kill himself at the beginning of the movie, because it's this thing where it's like, hey, could your sacrifice have made a difference? Maybe, but quite possibly not. Like, from everything else we've seen, no. Like, could be, probably not. And like, if we play that scene out ourselves, he uses these armor piercing rounds on Godzilla, who turns around and knocks him out of the cockpit of that plane, right? Like, that's probably how that would have played out. So it's like, he could have killed him, but it's probably just more war for the sake of feeling like you're doing something. Like, I'm contributing out of a sense of duty. And it could have been that he helps, but I think there needs to be the strong possibility of no thematically.
Especially when it's like trying to put all that accountability on one person. Like, you could have saved all of us, but you didn't, and that's why we lost.
Right.
Like, you can't put that all on one like kamikaze pilot. And yeah, it could have helped, but like, what if it had done enough to prevent the deaths that we saw in the opening scene? So to put that on, to make that kind of issue in a more individualist issue rather than like a collective systematic, like, this is war we're in, like, it involves bodies of people that it kind of, to Nathan's point, it wouldn't have made much of a difference whether or not he was able to shoot Godzilla or not.
Well, because I mean, that's Tachibana's whole point, right? Is that Tachibana says you could have saved everybody and blah blah blah, and then when he goes back home and he meets Sumiko, who is the neighbor, she says, it's because of you that my kids are dead. Like, that he is at fault for the one person, not anyone else, one person couldn't defeat the monster.
Yeah. It's all on you that these things are this bad. It's because of the way that you voted or you didn't enroll and you did this. It's your plastic straws are the reason that we're all drowning. Kind of vibes.
Which is funny because at the end, we do see that every one person matters as a group, right? Does that go against the theme?
No, and the reason I think is because it's the group. No one person matters if it's not for the whole group. What they accomplish only works because 100% of the people involved are there. If you take even one person out, then community matters, individualism didn't. The individual works as a part of the community, but like, if it had just been the plane, or if even like they hadn't had all of the people in their tugboats showing up at the very end, then like they still would have been screwed. And then I think it even still matches with the theme, because even though the community comes together and can work as a full collective to save the day, they still don't. Like, this is Godzilla Minus One, theoretically, right after this are the events of the original movie.
Is it? I thought this is a different continuity.
I think it can play both ways. Like, I think that you can watch this as like, right after this is Godzilla destroying Tokyo. Like, it's full destruction of Tokyo. I
hate this Godzilla. His soul. Like, soul to soul, person to person, I hate him. Like, I will never be able to root for this Godzilla. In Minus One, he is a monster. Kill him. I don't want anything to do with him. Ship him off to another planet. I'm not a fan.
I think there's a scale of like evil to good for a Godzilla, and like in Godzilla versus Kong, you have the most good guy Godzilla you could get. Like, he's there to protect all of us. This is Superman Godzilla.
Yeah.
And then you have this movie where it's like, not only is he a force of nature, he's an asshole. Yeah. Like, this is evil Godzilla. And then like in the middle, you have like the original movie, he's a force of nature, but also like a force of nature who wants to stomp on things. And then like in the full middle is Shin Godzilla. Again, not to spoil it, but you get very much the idea in Shin Godzilla, like, that this is a thing being born and it's just going to flail his arms because that's what happens when something's born. And you're like, he doesn't care who's around him. He's not spitting fire breath because we're good or bad, but that's because that's what this kind of creature does as he grows up. It's just true neutral. So like, but this movie, I would say, I think this is the most like evil asshole,
Mhm.
screw everybody Godzilla iteration.
And I don't
And
like
it's and it definitely is dependent on obviously the humans. Like I think it's like how the humans are in this story is like it will be a good like gauge of like how Godzilla is portrayed in the movie too. Because obviously like the Japanese people in Godzilla Minus One, I mean, yeah, like again going like they're victims of this tragedy. And so therefore Godzilla is that like monster that they still need to defeat. However, in like the Western Godzilla movies, like it's like there's still that like, oh, like yeah, he's protecting us, but also there's so humans that are like trying to still exploit this power that Godzilla has. And that's where like a lot of those like plot lines come where like the scientists are like, oh, I want to like dissect and see what he does for my own personal like self-interest too. So it's just I think yeah, it's definitely a reflection on humanity in the movie, depending like with the Godzilla that's like he's a tool in that sense.
Yeah,
too.
he complements what the story is
Yeah.
trying to
Yes.
say.
That's what I said.
Like, and again, I'm really excited for y'all to see Shin Godzilla. It's very important for those reasons when you watch that movie that Godzilla is neutral, where it's like
Mhm.
if we're dealing with like a because it's reflecting of the 2011 tsunami that caused the reactor meltdown.
Mm.
So it's like that's a full force of nature that's random, emotionless, and just a problem. And so we have to see how bad are people at coming together to solve a problem.
Yeah.
And like and so it works really well there. And then like I think most American properties tend to drift towards trying to turn whatever thing they're making the movie about into being a good guy because Americans are always looking for something to vote for. Like we're always like, who's the good guy here? Who's the hero we can latch ourselves to? It's like that was Loki. He's a bad guy. It's like, nah, we like him. We're gonna vote for Loki next year. It's like that kind of vibe. Like in everything, it's like Joker. We hate Joker. It's like nah, kind of more time I spend with him, I disagree. It's like no. So everything. It's like it doesn't matter. It's like we made a movie about a lizard that crushes everyone. It's like how long will it take all of us to want to vote for the lizard? Like we just like attaching to something.
I think that though that has to do with episodic storytelling and like basically you have to heighten, right? So like I don't know if you guys remember the first X-Men movie, but the literal problem, the ending is that Magneto wants to turn the UN into mutants, but it turns out like he's just gonna end up killing them. But he's like, no, it'll work, and like that's just X-Men 1.
Yeah,
and then
in the second one, he's willing to kill every human being on the planet.
Yes, and then X-Men 3 is like the Phoenix, and well, I mean it was just a mess. But like Avengers movies also kind of work in that respect too, right? Superhero movies. It's just like there's bigger, and whether you bring the villain in to fight an even bigger bad guy, like Fast and the Furious movies do that. Like,
yeah, and I think that's sort of the thing. It's like each time the threat gets bigger, everyone unites to the bigger threat because it doesn't. If you take like real world logic about like people being bad, it doesn't make sense for the X-Men to work with Magneto against another threat. Really, because it's like he tried to kill literally everyone. Like this guy's not good, but instead they're like, no, he's fine. We're gonna bring him in to help us. It's like, nah, I think you should let him sit this one out. He tried to kill everyone.
It's because
that trope is very fascinating. Like because I think the latest iteration that they did that with Aquaman 2. I don't know if you guys saw Aquaman 2, where they literally were like, let me just bring my brother who was trying to kill the humans in land to help us defeat this, and it's like, oh, okay. Like
I watched that movie. It very much also gives that vibe of like, well, I ran last year on the platform of trying to kill everybody, and I lost that election. So you can bring me in. That's fine. I didn't my bill didn't work, so I'll work with you on this. And you're like, this is a weird tone for a guy who tried to commit a mass atrocity.
Yeah, I mean, Aquaman 2 is a whole nother thing, but yeah. I think tying it back with Minus One is that like none of the characters were evil, like none of them were. Like we never, like even like the most like antagonistic is Tachibana to Koichi. Like he's
that's
the most
just conflicting. They're like they have tension to each other.
Yeah.
Right. Well, he hits him in the back of the head, but yes.
Right. They're not like, but it's not hateful. Like there's not like a I'm out to kill you vibe. It's more like I'm expressing my anger because screw you, and it's
how the government failed the people, right? And that like And then, I mean, it happens here. It's like going to a war. We don't support the people that fought the war. Like it's just a ongoing problem, country by country. That's just how it you know. And so this kind of does it, which makes it easier for us to root for the humans in this, and makes Godzilla that much worse because, you know, of that. Did you think people were gonna die in the end? Because I thought people were gonna die.
I thought more people were gonna die. I thought
Like,
I thought it was a
named
bold
characters.
choice.
You
I
know,
thought it was a bold choice to not kill people in the end, and perhaps even a really loving one, where it's like, hey, we need to say something really loving to the Japanese people, and say something about our ability, like the ability of Japanese people to endure and come together and move forward. And it's sort of I think the messaging is almost like we had enough tragedy, we can move forward, and that story works best if everyone moves forward.
yeah,
I agree with that too.
yeah. Koichi didn't need to die, and I really, it touched me that Tachibana essentially forgave him, right? And that forgiveness helped him realize that, like, the life you live is the important part. You know, continuing to live and continuing to love and continuing to fight. There wasn't an option in which they couldn't fight Godzilla.
Right. They needed
to.
Yeah, it's like even though you know the flood is coming in, you still need to put up the sandbags and what do they call it? The levee. You still need to build up the levee. And that's kind of like what they do to stop Godzilla. It's not like hey, we think we're gonna win. It's we have to do something. Like, you can't know the storm is coming and not do something.
Oh, that happens in the beginning. Or in the middle. That the government knows that Godzilla's going, and they don't evacuate the city.
Yeah.
So
I love how consistent this movie was about criticizing the idea of national governments not really caring what happens to local municipalities and local people,
and that the people are expendable.
It's like, well, we don't want to deal with all of the problem of an evacuation and the complications down the line. You know, it's not complicated caskets.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All in all, both these Godzilla franchises, I am a fan of. Even in its weak parts of Monarch and well, Monarch as a season, but then also Monarch as the MonsterVerse as a whole. There's enough space for both of these.
Yeah.
More introspective way. And I mean, sure, I would love for these MonsterVerse movies to have a better kind of tying theme like Kong Skull Island did. I would like to elevate it a little bit, because you could still have the fun of Kong Skull Island with a underlying thing. You know, Michael Crichton, it was very like anti like big corporations and with Jurassic Park and whatnot, and like, you know, but you still get a great ass Jurassic Park movie with this, you know, everything kind of tying together. Do you guys have any like thoughts about the space that we live in that we can have these two franchises?
Yeah, I think I agree with you, and I think that this comes back to what we were saying at the beginning of the episode, that like in a lot of ways the whole of the MonsterVerse is a TV show, kind of like the Marvel universe. It's this big TV show, and the Japanese movies are movies. They have like a clear thesis, and they tell you they work through a story and its characters clearly to like give me something full and packaged in each outing. And some of the MonsterVerse movies do that in like Skull Island and the 2014 Godzilla, because the 2014 Godzilla is definitely trying to be about like the 2011 reactor fallout or the reactor collapse. So like they can try that, just like the Marvel movies can have, like, you know, every other Marvel movie really has a message that it succeeds with. But I think that like at the moment it feels like the MonsterVerse TV show, like broader series, is much more concerned with having the big blowout fights and as many cool, like, as many monsters together as they can get, and that weakens like the cleanness of their stories and their themes by something they can do. Every time I sit down for a Monarch or a Godzilla versus Kong, I'm hoping that I'm getting a clean story because I know it's possible.
It is possible.
Yeah.
I don't know if you remember back in the day with superhero movies, there used to be a theory that you can't have multiple villains and have it be a good movie. Like, there used to be this thought, but as we've found out in like a good amount of superhero movies, is that you can have a clean, consistent one if you have multiple levels of villains and the theme kind of stays intact. And, you know, it doesn't have to be Amazing Spider-Man 2 that has way too many villains, but like, you know, like The Dark Knight has multiple antagonists, you know, and and I'm trying to remember what else. There are Days of Future Past is one of my favorite my favorite X-Men movie. And like
that has multiple bad guys. The Batman has multiple.
The Batman?
Yeah.
It's possible, but it's not possible if you're lazy. If you're a lazy writer, or you have to go through multiple revisions of multiple writers, maybe multiple villains, and a cohesive, dense story is impossible. I don't know.
I think the big problem always becomes when you have like a wave of bad guys where it's like and because that also feels very much like what happens in the MonsterVerse movies is if it's like hey, you have your superhero, Godzilla in this case, it's like your superhero is going to have to fight all of them at once. It's like, then that's never fun. But if it's like, hey, your superhero needs to make it to X destination of getting one bad guy, but in order to get to him, he has to kind of go through a few people. Or like has to get to this destination of whatever, and that always works more. It's like the other bad guys are B plots and C plots, or like one scene at a time versus like they're all gonna fight in a battle royale at the end. It's like that's when it becomes jumbly. Like Batman and Robin, all of the bad guys in Batman and Robin are the same tier, and they're all kind of fighting him together, and that's why it's a mess.
And they should have different motivations, but for some reason they're working together with the same motivation.
And same thing with these monsters. Why did the monsters in King of the Monsters all work together? Why weren't they fighting each other more?
Wait, what happens in the it's like those lesser monsters, like that gorilla elephant thing? Is that what we're talking about?
They're not in King of Monsters. It's every monster that Godzilla fights in the like Kyoto in like the 60s through 80s movies, all wake up together and they all go to like fight Godzilla in Boston, and they like all and maybe they kind of rumble. It's like a big battle royale movie, and like some of them kind of rumble with each other a little bit to get to him, but it's not like Godzilla. What you'd think it would be is this is a movie of Godzilla needing to put out monsters around the globe until he gets to the hardest one. It's like that I can get behind. Instead, it feels much more like they're all working together because the crew of monsters has woken up and they're listening to the call of King Ghidorah, the top monster there. It's like, that's so busy. That's so busy.
Okay, I forgot about that. That's the one with Rodan and Mothra and like multiple Mutos and like, right? Like they come back from the first one.
Yeah, it's too many things. It's too... And it's so busy and it's the same. And I my criticism of Godzilla versus Kong is similar. That it's like make it Godzilla versus Kong, not Godzilla versus Kong versus a mech Godzilla versus whatever else.
Yeah. But I have faith that you can make a good one. You know?
Yeah.
I think Monarch at its best shows that it's possible to make people like make it kind of have that good equation. But at its worst, I'm like, okay, whatever. Passable, you know? I want to thank you guys both so much for coming on this show, talking with me. This is the first double feature, Monarch Legacy of Monsters, Godzilla Minus One. Do you guys have any closing thoughts that you need to really get off your chest about either one of these shows?
I do hope that Monarch Legacy Monsters does get a season 2, just so we can continue to improve on what they've established in season 1. I think there's a lot of potential. There are some good qualities and good moments throughout the season, and good characters to like build upon. So I really hope that the budget will keep budgeting, and then they can have that budget to make a season 2. And Godzilla Minus One, I will say I'm glad that they got an Oscar nomination for Best Visual Effects. I'm glad that there was some level award recognition for the movie this year. So congrats to both like of these like Godzilla pieces of media that are doing very well.
Yeah. I wouldn't have nominated for Best Special Effects because that's my one criticism. But what I would have nominated for like screenplay, like I don't know, maybe Best Picture, but like
remembering that it's achievement in special effects, because like I agree. No, I would still nominate it, but like I agree with you that it's not as strong as some other things this year. Like I think the creator should take home this award without even a question. But remembering that it's achievement, and I think this is like again 5 people dealing with lollipop sticks, and they made this movie. I'm like, this is incredible. Like that's amazing. They made this movie with nothing. And that's phenomenal. But and so for that, it's always nice to see people get recognized for what they could do with so little in the face of like $300 million Disney movies getting nominations.
Yeah.
And I'll say I really want to agree with Marmar really emphatically that I love where this show was able to end. And like I like this show. Like or I liked Monarch more than not. And I think that most of the things that weakened the show, like the needing to make you not trust people because we're new to the world, they don't have to deal with that anymore. And they can now just take the characters they've got and they could just move forward with a story. Yeah. And I'm really excited to see what they do now that all of their pieces are in place. You know?
There's still the Apex Corporation or whatever it's called.
Apex,
right?
I think
they're the ones who make Mecha Godzilla, right?
I think so with Charles Dance from Game of Thrones.
Yeah, so I think they make Mecha Godzilla, which is kind of what they're working on, right? With I don't know, were they doing something in this show that they were saying that they were working on some sort of science?
They just want to like exploit the technology of monsters again with very vagueness. They were just like, monsters can lead us somewhere. We don't know where, but we're excited about it.
Yeah.
I will say the King Kong coming in that final second was I was like, so I like that. I like how it ended in that regard, like kind of leaving us wanting more and hoping that there will be more.
I love King Kong. I think it's like, I love monkeys. I love apes. I love like the new Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes is coming out.
Looks really sick. That looks so sick.
I'm so excited for that. And so seeing King Kong here makes me want King Kong to have like a child that then teams up with the Monarch crew. Like, if we can't get King Kong, let's get a smaller version that like
there's a tiny King Kong, or not tiny, but there's like a King Kong baby in this new movie.
Yeah. But he's kind of like an orangutan looking one, right?
I think he's just supposed to be a baby. I think you're being judgmental of Chillins.
He's red. He's red though, right? Because the bad. Well,
you don't know his mom. Maybe his mom's red.
maybe there's a bad kind of orangutan looking guy with like a scar, I think, and like he's the bad guy.
You think it's his kid? You think it's
his
child?
No. Oh,
I don't know. It's either his kid or it's him when he's a kid.
No, there is separately fully a kid.
Like there's
there's a time where the human characters look up and they're like, look at that baby King Kong.
Yeah. I think he's reddish. I think he's like almost orangutan because he's leaner. Like those,
I have a very important question as we end as I know that you need us to stop talking, but I have just with how much you like King Kong stuff and apes in general. I wonder, do you have like for you the best of the sentient ape movies, like a favorite Planet of the Apes or King Kong version? Like it's like this is the best ape movie.
I mean, I like the trilogy, the Planet of the Apes the recent one.
You have a favorite in that group?
Oof. I have to rewatch it because I've only seen each of them once, but I'm gonna rewatch them again and go on a marathon.
I have them all right here or somewhere behind me.
Nice.
My favorite's the second one. I think the one that has Gary Oldman. I think that's the best.
Yeah. I mean, the third one's really good too. I think I mean, I think the second and third are better than the first.
First one's really fun. But you're right. The second two are better. I think
They're more
for my
cohesive.
money, it's the original Charlton Heston movie and the second of these two movies. Those are my two favorites.
Okay.
Yeah.
Which one has Paul Giamatti as a orangutan ape?
That's the Tim Burton one from the 90s.
Oh.
That movie, I have a relationship with that movie, and it's not nice.
Well, yeah. I actually do want to rewatch that movie again because
it's not terrible, but it's also bizarre.
Yeah.
Like there are parts of the movie where you'll be like, that was kind of fun, and other parts of the movie where you go, I hated what I just saw. And you go back and forth like that a lot. Where you're like,
I just
wow,
saw
that was
no, yeah. Continue.
it's just that. It's just up and down.
I just saw Paul Giamatti like really enjoyed being in that movie from like a recent interview that he did, and I was like, okay, I'm intrigued because I'm like, he's actually playing an orangutan, and I was like, oh, he's not one of the humans in the movie, he's just an orangutan.
Well, and he's having a lot of fun.
Yeah,
like he
sounded like he had fun with it.
It's like him. That whole movie's a stacked cast, by the way, like an insanely stacked cast.
Yeah.
And he's having a lot of fun in the role, and it's also around the time that his career had blown up. Like right before then, he was a small part of other movies. Like he's in the Truman Show as just another dude working for Ed Harris. And I would say that probably Planet of the Apes. It's like Planet of the Apes, Sideways, and then Big Fat Liar.
Yeah,
is around this time where he was finally getting bigger roles. Like not just like we'll hire him. It's like no, he's good. Put him in stuff.
Yeah,
and. Yeah, that's a weird movie. Like you got to put that movie on knowing that you're about to watch something you're going to have confused feelings about. They make some of the apes too horny. They're just too horny.
Isn't there like a lap dance scene or something?
Yeah. Yeah, and like he full on like Mark Wahlberg kisses.
Oh, he's in that?
Oh yeah, that's
the problem. Like
that's the other. Yeah, you watch this movie and you're like, I think I hate Mark Wahlberg, and you're like, did you know about the hate crimes? You're like, I thought this movie was the hate crime. There's more. It's like there's more. It's a weird thing.
Yeah, me and my mom hate Mark Wahlberg, but we hate him in different degrees. She hates him way more that she doesn't even want to see his face. For me, I'm like, I don't want to see his face. I don't. But also, if I'm gonna rewatch that Planet of the Apes movie, I have to see his face. Like, there's no getting around it.
I feel the same way I do with him as I do about Mel Gibson, which is I don't want to see his face anymore. Yeah. But the things that I've already seen him in that were from before either I knew he was terrible or before he was terrible, it's like, okay. So like for Mark Wahlberg, Mark Wahlberg gets the first Ted and The Departed. And those are the two things I've allowed of him.
Okay.
I think
it's. How are you feeling with? Aren't they both in a movie together? They play a father-son duo.
Never. They have like started the
Daddy's Home.
They've got a couple things together now because they produce movies together now.
They're two
assholes. Of course they do. Of course they do.
It's the canceled white men who try to make movies for Christian bro guys. It's like always about we saved the children from the brown people who were going to give them drugs. It's like that's every plot. It's like I prayed enough that I could get over being so buff, except I can't. Like that's the story.
That's a good summary. But isn't Mel Gibson in the Mad Max movies?
The original Mad Max. So crazy thing about Mel Gibson. Like a lot of people have been like, he was never a good actor. He was just pretty. 80s to 90s Mel Gibson is genuinely one of the greatest actors to ever live. Like you'll watch a performance of his, you're like, I hate that he's so good, but he is. And when you watch him in the original Mad Max movies, he brings this like mix, but like kind of like Tom Hardy does, this mix between being just tormented and crazy and sad and charismatic and the flashing of all that you're like, oh, I totally understand how this guy got Lethal Weapon and Hamlet and all of these other things that he got throughout the 80s and 90s. And then he,
went off the rails.
He revealed all of us who he is.
Yeah.
And you're like, you were so close.
I just wanted to shout out Pain and Gain, which I think is an underrated Michael Bay movie. It also has Mark Wahlberg in it, but it has Anthony Mackie and it has The Rock, and I think it's one of The Rock's better acting.
Okay.
All of them I think are for some reason. Tony Shalhoub's in it, but for some reason like the movie, the movie, like, it works for some reason. We got to get going, and I want to thank you guys so much for coming and being on the show. I want to thank that one wizard kid out there. I want to thank Carson for dropping in. Carson and that one wizard kid. Thank you so much for being in the Twitch chat with us. Before we get going, Nathan, where can we find you? What do you got coming up? Anything you want to plug?
I am everywhere that you can watch short form videos. So if you search The Favoring Wind on Instagram, Facebook, well, not Facebook, don't go to Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, or YouTube, you'll find me there. And you're going to hear me doing a lot of like movie analysis here and there, some political stuff, just humor, whatever. But keep an eye out this year. My wife and I will be telling you more about the process of trying to get some screenplays pitched and written, and just what it's like to get your foot in the door in indie filmmaking, and what that process is like as we go through it ourselves.
That sounds awesome. Can you say my wife?
My wife.
Thanks, Nathan, so much for coming on here. It's always great to have you and your analysis. So thank you. Marmar, it was your first time. Where can people find you? What do you got coming up? Anything you want to plug?
Yeah, I'm like Marmar Marisa on TikTok. I'm on Instagram as well. I do have a letterbox, and I'm on Serialize. So if you want to see just more concise reviews and not like just 1 sentence, 2 sentence short answers on movies or TV shows, go on those platforms as well. But yeah, I'm out here just like talking about TV shows I love watching, movies that I love watching, and sometimes doing rewatch series depending on upcoming projects. But yeah, just thoughts and perspectives on things I love watching.
Awesome. It was your first time being on this. I loved hearing your analysis, and I would love to have you on even more episodes.
Yes, definitely.
Not only Godzilla episodes, we will do even more. So thank you, Marmar. What are you pointing at, Nathan?
This is a Fallout image. Oh. There's going to be that Fallout show this year. Have me on for Fallout.
You know, I will. That's great. Also, that just makes it so that I have to watch Fallout also in order to do these episodes.
So good. It looks so
I'm not saying it's going to be bad. I just have nothing. I don't know anything about Fallout. So,
we'll talk after the stream when we're not live. I'll give you a very quick Fallout pitch after the stream.
All right. Kesounds good. Thank you, Nathan. Thank you, Marmar. Thank you, everybody out there. If you are watching us live, you're watching us on twitch.tv/The Keeg Show or youtube.com/The Keeg Show, or you're listening to the podcast wherever you get your podcast from: Apple Podcasts, Google Play, SoundCloud, Spotify, and iHeartRadio. If you're on social media, TikTok and Instagram are our 2 biggest ones at The Keeg Show, but we're also on like Facebook and Threads and Twitter and all that at The Keeg Show or /The Keeg Show. Find us pretty much anywhere on social media, and we do have a Patreon at patreon.com/The Keeg Show. Now, we also have thekeegshow.com, where we're writing articles and trying to build that back up again. It was on hiatus for a little bit, but if you want to check out articles, including articles written by me or written by Lex from Wednesday Pool, he wrote a recent comic book related one, or some of our really good articles by Comics by Kalen, back when Kalen was writing, those are really good too. So thekeegshow.com if you're into that sort of thing. Other than that, this is the Keeg Talks. This is the show brought to you by the Keeg, where we talk about a different topic every single week. We also have Comic Talk every Thursday at 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern, where we talk about DC, Marvel, and indie comics that came out that week. That's a weekly show. This is a weekly show. We got other stuff in the works, including cons that we're going to be going to. I think Emerald City Comic Con I'm going to be going to in Seattle. Definitely stay tuned for that. A lot of cool stuff coming up, but stay tuned for all that. Thank you once again for being on the show. Thank you much for watching. And once again, I'm your host, Dimithri Perera, and this has been the Keeg Talks, Monarch, Legacy of Monsters, and Godzilla Minus One. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.